This is the first in a series of webinars on depth and complexity. This webinar is an introduction to the icons and ideas for beginning implementation in your classroom. These are the icons that were developed by Dr. Sandra Kaplan and Betty Gould. There are 8 icons of depth and 3 icons of complexity. We will review each one of the icons and examples for use in the classroom. Birdseed.com has a wealth of information on depth and complexity. You may grab a copy of this PDF from his website, which is linked here. This PDF gives examples of appropriate questions to ask for each of the icons. You will be able to grab a copy of the slides for viewing, and you'll be able to link to all of the activities and resources in this presentation at the end. So now we will begin to look at the icons of depth. Depth refers to approaching or studying something from the concrete to the abstract, or from the known to the unknown. Depth requires students to examine topics by determining the facts, concepts, generalizations, principles, and theories related to them. Depth necessitates uncovering more details and new knowledge related to a topic of study. Depth encourages students to adopt perspectives and to see patterns and connections. Using the icons of depth teaches students to take their thinking and questioning to a higher level. The language of a discipline icon invites students to think about any words, phrases, and/or expressions that are part of the content. Students should be thinking about how and why these words and phrases are important to the learning. And language of a discipline is represented by a mouth or lips. So language of a discipline can be the terms that are specific to an area of study, tools used by a disciplinarian. It can include tools, jargon, acronyms, special phrases, abbreviations, and even cultural expressions. Some ways that you can use language of a discipline is to think about terms used by professionals. So if you were an architect, what terms would you use on a daily basis with customers and clients? If you were in the medical field, what are some terms you would use? If you are an IT specialist, what are some terms or jargon that you would use? If you're teaching specific content, say you're teaching parts of the plant, then you can use specific vocabulary to describe all the parts of the plant. You can take it further by asking why maybe these specific labels were given to the plant. The details are one of the easiest to use and pair well with other icons. Details include features, defining elements, elaborations. It may include parts, attributes, variables, distinguishing traits. Some examples of using details are when you describe character traits and background information. How would the story be different if traits were different in that character? Identifying important details in word problems in math. How would it change the problem if a detail were omitted? And looking at photographs from history or any photograph and looking at all the details. How do those details lead to understanding about the event that's happening? So patterns are more about repetition, reoccurring elements or events, factors, motifs or designs. What is the predictability or the repetition? And some examples for using patterns would be looking at patterns in poetry. How does the pattern contribute to the mood of the poem? Of course, looking for patterns in numbers and shapes, since math is all about patterns. And then asking students, could they create a rule for the pattern? That starts them into early algebra. Identifying patterns in authors and artists' work over time, like what were some specific patterns that you see in every piece of artwork that an artist does, or in a series of books, what's something that you see happen in every book or something that's mentioned in each book. You can discuss how patterns have shaped history, how have those patterns shaped the world through events that have happened. You can even have students think about a typical day at school and what patterns emerge in their day, and consider what might happen if that pattern was broken. Rules are all about structure and organization, and you'll notice that this icon looks a lot like the tree diagram. If you've ever used thinking maps, you could incorporate that when you're talking about rules. So rules are about structure, implicit and explicit factors. What are the causes and effect? How do you organize things? So it's about order and the reasons, and explaining and classifying. So some examples of using rules. You might think about, what are the rules of geometry when you're studying in math? Or what are the rules in science content? Explaining the rules of the scientific process and what might happen if a rule is broken in that process. Or how do the rules of government benefit or hinder society? You can use this icon at the beginning of the year also to set class rules or virtual learning rules. For trends, we're thinking about the events and actions that influence other events and actions. You can pair this icon with patterns to take it deeper. Trends focuses on ongoing factors, factors of cause and effect, persistent changes over time, or the general direction in which something tends to move. Some examples are influence, forces, compare, contrast, and forecasting. Some ways that you might use trends. If you're teaching economics in the stock market, you might have students look at the trends and how the trends in the stock market are affecting someone's portfolio, or what might have been happening in society to cause this trend. In books and novels, identify the trends in a character's actions and predict how they might react in a future situation, knowing how they've reacted in the past. Or think about how fashion trends have changed over time and what has been the influence of those changes. Is there a pattern to these trends? So unanswered questions can also be a very easy icon to implement in the primary grades. You can encourage questioning in younger kids by using this icon. So some of the things that unanswered questions focuses on are unclear ideas, unknown, unproven, or incomplete information, and areas yet to be explored. Examples would be missing parts, discrepancies, or unresolved issues. So some examples in using unanswered questions, maybe you talk about what questions about hurricanes would you ask a weatherman? Or when you're finished reading a series, what questions would students still have for the author? What is still unclear, or what is something that wasn't resolved? And then when you're having discussions in class, this would be a great way to remind students to ask follow-up or clarifying questions during discussion, So if someone gives a response and they're not sure what that student might mean, then they can ask a clarifying question in an appropriate way. So it's a great way to remind them during that discussion. Ethics is all about dilemmas, controversies, value-laden ideas, elements of bias or prejudice or discrimination. Ethics can be taught on many levels. At first, you may think this would be a hard icon or hard concept to implement with younger students, but they do very well with this. It could be used to teach appropriate responses to classmates or appropriate behavior in various areas of the school. So some examples are judging values, differing opinions, differing points of view, right and wrong. So there's lots of ways that this could be implemented from primary all the way up through school. And here's some examples for using ethics. It would be great for opening up discussion about social issues. And we know our gifted students are very concerned about many of the social issues. It could be used to get students thinking about how they would respond to situations or events in their classroom or with their family and friends. It can also be used to discuss characters in books and the choices that they made or choices that they should have made in the story. So Big Ideas is another easy icon to begin introducing even in the early grades. It's focusing on generalizations, principles, theories, overarching general statements or rules, and general principles derived from inductive reasoning from detailed facts. So some examples are drawing conclusions based on evidence, summarizing, making generalizations. So here are some examples in using Big Ideas. You can use the icon as a graphic organizer to show the main idea or big idea and the supporting evidence. You could display the icon with an overarching concept that you're going to be studying for the year or for a specific unit of study. You can have students think about the big idea as they progress through a ladder set from the Jacob's Ladder Comprehension Series. And it's easily implemented into language arts when identifying main idea and theme. So that's one way that you could implement it early on with younger students. So now that we've looked at the icons of depth, now we're going to switch and look at the icons of complexity. And remember, there's only 3 icons of depth of complexity. And these icons focus on helping students make connections and see relationships. So complexity includes making relationships, connecting other concepts, and layering. Complexity is the why and how approach that connects and bridges to other disciplines and enhances the meaning of a unit of study. Complexity encourages students to relate concepts and ideas at a more sophisticated level. It helps students to see associations among diverse subjects, topics, or levels. And it also helps them to find multiple solutions from multiple points of view. So the first icon in complexity is over time. And we're looking at past, present, future relationships, effects of time on knowledge and understandings, and how and why things change or remain the same. So some examples are connecting points in time, comparing and contrasting, or just examining a time period. So complexity helps students see how what they have learned across different disciplines can be connected. And so some examples of using over time would be you could have students track their assessment data over time. Do they see any patterns or relationships in the data? Maybe they can pinpoint something that was going on in their life if they see a discrepancy in their data. You could also ask students to think about changes over time when they're looking at life cycles or weather cycles. You can ask students to think about how laws have held up over time. And so if there was a specific law or rule that you're looking at, then they can look at, what has been some decisions that have been made about those laws or how have they changed through the course of time. Multiple perspectives is represented by the eyeglasses, and it focuses on opposing or differing viewpoints, varied opinions or reactions to the same thing, idea, or event, effects of roles and responsibilities on perceptions, and some examples are different roles and knowledge and opposing viewpoints. So some examples of using multiple perspectives. You may have students think about the different perspectives of the Loyalists and the Patriots in the Revolutionary War, and how did that impact the outcome of the war. You can have students think about task from the perspective of a professional in the field. So think about how different professionals will attack a specific task based on their knowledge of their profession. You can even have students look at fairy tales or different characters and what are the varying points of view from the different characters. How do these viewpoints change the story? So maybe a book or text is being written from one viewpoint, but you have students think about how another character might be seeing the same event and how they might be reacting and responding to that. And multiple perspectives encourages students to look at content from varying viewpoints and perspectives. So across disciplines shows connections among several disciplines. It's interdisciplinary. It encourages finding supporting evidence from many disciplines. So students are connecting, associating, integrating, and looking at cross-curricular study. Across disciplines reminds students to connect their learning. So here are some examples. You can encourage students to think about ideas in varying contexts and embed the big concept that you're studying into all content areas. You can provide scenarios that prompt students to think about how one event or idea can impact another seemingly unrelated event. So how might wildfires affect crops in a specific area? And how might that also in turn affect the stock market and what's going on there? So just having them look and see how events and ideas are related. So now that we've looked at the 8 icons of depth and the 3 icons of complexity, now we're going to take a look at what are some ways that you can start to implement depth and complexity into your classroom or even to share with other teachers in your building. So first, you could post the icons in your classroom to generate interest with the students. You can try and integrate one or more icons into your daily lessons. You can use the icons in centers to differentiate the tasks that students will be completing. You can also use the icons to create task statements during your instructional planning. So you can start off small and incorporate the icons a few at a time or even just one at a time. You can use the icons in centers to focus on student thinking. So if you've got independent learning stations or centers and you want the students thinking specifically, those icons can cue them in on how they should be thinking about that task. So when you post the icons, This makes the students aware of the icons and what they represent. But don't just teach the icons. You're teaching the concepts to new levels of depth and complexity. The pictures are just there to remind them of the thinking strategies that they should be going through as they interact with the content. So you can also let students draw the icons. They don't have to look exactly like the icons that are here in the presentation. The icons are just serving as reminders for how the students will think through the concepts. So you can try out a few task statements. You can change the wording to differentiate the task or give choice. So this comes from J. Taylor and Associates, and they have a flip book where you can find different thinking skills, the dimensions of differentiation. You'll know what content that you're relating it to, and then their research skill and the product that they're going to produce. And so you'll create a task statement that says, I will blank the dimension of differentiation related to my study of blank. I will get organize information by, and you'll fill in a research skill, and share my findings by or in or through a specific product. So this is an easy way to organize your activities that you want students to do and make sure you have higher levels of thinking in that task. So you can combine the icons to really increase thinking. You can pair them with another instructional strategy. We have two activities here and they are linked. So when you go and view the slideshow later, you can actually click and go to these activities. The first one is using multiple icons in a jigsaw. So in this particular task, the students are studying the Native Americans and the missions of California. And each group in the jigsaw is going to get a task card and they're going to share. And so you can see that one group is going to be focused on patterns. Another group is going to focus on the rules of living at the missions. One will be focused on the ethics. Was it right or wrong for the Native Americans to be brought into the missions? And then the last group will have multiple perspectives, and they will describe the different perspectives of the Native Americans living in the missions and then those who were not. The big idea that this is structured around is power can be used or misused. And so you can see how you could incorporate these into your concept-based units of study. And so that activity is actually linked. And then look at the bookmarks on the right. These are free, so you can link to this and get these bookmarks for yourself. Each bookmark has a different icon that they're focusing on, and so this one is across disciplines. And the bookmarks just say, how does information from this reading selection connect to another subject? Create an illustration that represents the reading selection. Write a journal entry from the perspective of the main character. So they're task embedded. Great. There's a whole set that's free. And so you can click on the picture here and you'll be able to go and grab a copy of those bookmarks. And they're a good start. They come as a set, but you may want to adjust the questions in the bookmarks to be a little bit higher level, depending on the age of the students that you're going to be working with. So these are some of the resources that were used in the development of this presentation. The Gifted Guild's Guide to Depth and Complexity. This is by Ian Bird and Lisa Van Gemmert. There are links to their websites below. They have a wealth of information on there. And this is a great book. It goes through lots of different questions that you can ask with the different icons and just gives you really practical ways to incorporate teaching the concepts with these icons and the strategies of thinking. Also, J. Taylor Associates has great resources. The flip book is the one that I was using for the task statement. And so there's a flip book 1 and a flip book 2 that you can purchase from J. Taylor Associates. And also they have another book that I used for the presentation called Teaching Social Issues and Equity with Children's Literature. And so lots of well-known children's lit that you can use to focus on social issues and equity. And so I had used that in several of the slides today. They have a lot of other great resources that you can get. I would encourage you to take a look, but there's also lots of other resources out on the web that you can purchase. But these really focus on great questioning with these activities. And also J. Taylor did a series of webinars during the COVID shutdown. And so you can find those archived on their webpage as well. And so if you would like to view these slides to go back over them and review them, then you can just scan the QR code and it will take you to the slide deck. And again, you will only be able to view the slide deck. You won't be able to download and edit. But if you have any questions, just feel free to give me a call or email me. And my email address is shared here, ehurst@alsde.edu. And again, this is just part 1 of Depth and Complexity, just an introduction to the icons. We will have a second slide deck presentation that will go more in depth with how to actually use these icons and give you some ideas for other activities you can do, and then get into looking at using the icons with frames. And that's a way to really use several icons at once and let students see how they're all connected. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that you will take some time and try to implement this. This is a great way to share these thinking strategies with teachers when you're doing consultative services. So if you are in planning with teachers, this would be a great introduction to share and get them using at least 1 or 2 icons at a time. You could even start with the icons, say in 1st, 2nd grade, even kindergarten. But if you find that's a little too much, you could start to introduce 1 or 2 or 3 in 1st grade and then add a few each year until they've seen all the icons. Or you can introduce them all at once. It might be a little overwhelming for younger grades, but you could introduce them all at once. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And again, you can get the slide deck here. Thank you.